Hey guys, another video for our healthcare in Japan playlist. One of our patrons, who also happens to live in Japan, sent a rather lengthy message having a little bit of a rant, a little bit of a vent about some frustrations and irritations about some stuff that's going on in Japan at the moment. And we had to agree with a lot of it and promised that we'd make a video about it. So here we are talking about it. But just first of all, just want to clarify, whenever we address topics like this, there are always some people who manage to either misinterpret or misrepresent what was said in the video, and that's sort of inevitable. But it doesn't matter how careful you are, there's always someone who misrepresents or misinterprets what you said. So just want to clarify a couple of things first off. First of all, obviously, Japan is in a really good position compared to some other countries at the moment. You know, we've had 800 deaths, which is terribly tragic and very, very sad. And a real catastrophe, obviously, but compared to some other countries who had that number of deaths every day, Japan has done reasonably well, and it looks like we're through the worst of it, possibly. And again, you never know, there could be another little spike after this, but it does look like we're through the worst of it, and they've started to take the state of emergency off different prefectures, so we know that it's pretty good here. We've lost about half our income. So we're really struggling as a young family. We're really struggling at the moment, and it's only really this work that we do on our YouTube channel and our support through our patrons on Patreon that have kept us afloat, basically. We just wouldn't have been able to pay the bills. As it is, we've left a couple of rather large bills in the hope that we'll be able to get to them later on. But again, only mentioning that because we know there's a lot of people around the world at the moment who have zero income. So we know, compared to those people, that we're still very well off, you know. So we know, just to clarify first of all, we know our situation here is much better than a lot of other people around the world, and that Japan in general is doing a lot better than a lot of other countries around the world. So we know that. Having said that, and again, they have dealt with it pretty well as well. Obviously, you can see that by the results. A lot of that's probably down to the Japanese people themselves, and we've talked about that on previous videos. The Japanese people themselves, the way they conduct themselves with masks and washing their hands and social distancing and their usual cleanliness behaviour is probably what's made the difference. But also, in fairness to the governments involved, you know, they've obviously made some decisions that must have been reasonably effective to have had the results that they've had. Relatively, you know, relative to some countries. Relative to some other countries, not so good. You know, South Korea did much better than Japan did. So, you know, compared to some countries, not so good. Compared to a lot of countries, quite good. Point of this video, though, and what our patron friend was talking about was just some of the illogical decisions that get made, and some of the irrational things that we see, and some of the inconsistencies that we see. And so he had quite a rant about some things that were frustrating him with his schools and with his work and with the other things like that. So we won't repeat any of the things he said, but we can tell you our own experiences. One of the things, obviously, it's difficult for the governments to make decisions for different areas. They tend to make big blanket decisions, you know, and there's some areas like this one where there's 50,000 people living in this local area and no active cases of the virus at all, zero. So for us, it was a little bit frustrating when early on, you know, they shut the schools down and they shut down the dojo and they shut down lots of places, seemingly unnecessarily. So who knows, in hindsight, maybe if they hadn't shut them down, maybe if there had been a case, maybe the situation here would be a lot worse. So maybe that's the case. But it's the inconsistency that's frustrating. So we're about to drive past a gym, 24-hour gym that we showed you in a previous video, and the people are in there pumping iron and running on running machines and riding on bikes really close together. The room is very small, and it used to be a convenience store, and the machines are all side by side, and we can see the people in there all lined up, sweating and puffing and panting all over each other. And they haven't stopped doing that. That place has been open 24 hours a day since this. Well, it never stopped. It's always been open 24 hours a day. It never stopped. No, it never closed for one day. And nobody insisted that they did close. There was some general calls on gyms to close, But that was it. There was no sort of, as we explained earlier, there's no laws to make anybody do anything, except the pachinko. And then again, so here's this 24-hour gym on the right-hand side here. It's been open 24 hours a day, never closed for a day, right? And the pachinko was open until about a week or so ago. We showed you the pachinko still open. And about a week or so ago, they got serious with them and made them shut down. Sort of guilted them into it and made them shut down. And then Mr. Abe has lifted the state of emergency in most of the prefectures. So they're all open again. So the ones in this area were only closed for a week or so during the whole exercise, you know, since this year. They only closed for 1 week and they're open again. And that gym was 24 hours a day. And yet the dojo has been closed since February, and our martial arts teacher has phoned up about 4 or 5 times, and he called up, he said, you know, the dojo's closed until the middle of March. Hey, here's a scene up here ahead, guys. It's like a car accident. Dojo's closed to the middle of March. And okay, so made note in the diary, okay, you know, go back to the dojo, 17th of March, whatever it was. And then he called again before the 17th of March and changed it again. And now it's May. How do you do this? Look at this. A straight stretch of road. Well, not really, it's got a curve. He's turned it right round. How do you do that? Good job, dude. There's a bonus. A little bit of a bonus hidden in the video for you. No idea how he managed to do that. This is one way, by the way, so who knows what he's done there. Anyway, where were we? Oh yeah, the dojo, the teacher, the martial arts teacher. Yeah, so he called once, you know, March, and then he called again end of March, then he called again middle of April. And what was happening was the old guys in the city that make the decisions about these city buildings, about these dojo things, were only making decisions 2 weeks ahead. So they were saying, okay, we'll close it for another 2 weeks. We'll close it for another 2 weeks. We'll close it for another 2 weeks. And there's been a lot of stuff like that. The schools are the same. And it seems that people are, the old guys that run the place are scared to make decisions. And there's been a lot of criticism. I mean, we got no criticism of Abe. We can't see, he's a politician, you know, we can't see much difference between him and the others. But a lot of Japanese people complain about him that he doesn't make any strong decisions. And you can sort of see that he's very soft. He'll announce that tomorrow he's going to make an announcement and make an announcement about a decision. And the next day he'll make an announcement that there's going to be a decision to maybe close something or maybe declare a state of emergency. He's very iffy. And it's sort of, some people have said, one old guy told me recently that after World War II, that the leaders are very sensitive about being dictatorial. That they don't want to make big, strong decisions and tell people what to do. But after World War II, that sort of, you know, that being told what to do and everybody bowing and high and running off and doing it, people became more sensitive about that. So what happens now, as we've explained in previous videos, it's more just about social pressure and guilt and onagai, which is a favour. And we've heard that lots of times from the federal government and from our local government, onagai. And they'll tell you that it's an honour guy. One guy came around once asking us to connect up to the sewerage system, and it was going to cost us about $2,500 that we didn't have, and just said, just don't have the money for that. Are we obliged to do it? You know, we have to do it. He said, no, it's an honour guy, right? So it's a favour. The city were asking us a favour to connect to the, and this is the sort of thing you get. So in a situation like this, where they're wanting to declare states of emergencies, he declared a state of emergency, lots of prefectures. And then other prefectural governments put their hands up and said, please include us too. And then he included them too. But then there was no real direction. There was no real strong rules or laws or anything like that to tell people what they had to do. You must do this, you must do that. There was none of that. It was all guidelines. You know, we'd like people to do this, we'd like people not to do that. And it was all just asking us, please don't do this, and please don't do that, and please do this, and please do that. And that's very much like that, you know, which some of the Japanese people complained that they needed Abe and some other people to be stronger. Don't know if that's right or not. But the point of explaining that is that what we see is we see it on a national level, and we see it on a prefectural level, and we see it on a city level too. And so we started this video in another city. We're now in another city. And the differences, you know, there's a park near here that we showed you that was closed in February. As soon as the pandemic thing got announced, they closed it down. And then a month later they opened it again, and it's been opened ever since. And then there's another one in another city just north of here that we showed you this week in another video. And that one was never closed, right, until this week. And this week, Abe took this prefecture is Aichi Prefecture, and Abe took this prefecture off the state of emergency list this week. And at the beginning of this week, that city's playgrounds, that park's playgrounds were shut down for the first time. So, you know, it had been, what, 3 months, and the state of emergency had been in effect for more than a month. And at the end of it all, they shut down that park. And so what it is, it's these old guys that are slow to make decisions, and they have to have lots of committee meetings and lots of discussions, and they all sit around going, what should we do, what should we do? So they're slow to make decisions, and then they make their decision, and often it's too late. So those guys were too late to shut that playground down, but they shut it down anyway. So that video that we shot, there were people pulling up into the car park because this week the state of emergency was lifted. So right, let's go to the park, and suddenly the playgrounds are shut down because they finally got round to doing it, you know. And the inconsistency. So, you know, this city here, the parks were closed in February, and then they've been open ever since. And then that other one that north of here, you know, it was closed, they were open the whole time, and then they'll just close this week. And then in the other city where we started, the parks were never shut down. And when I say shut down, they weren't really shut down. What they did was either locked the car parks to the parks, so you couldn't get your car in, or they wrapped up the playgrounds in that yellow tape saying, you know, do not enter. But you can still go to the park. But just my point is that this inconsistency, and this is what our friend at Patreon was complaining about, was the inconsistency, you know, and the sort of irrational things that they do. And you know, on this hand, you know, the pachinkos are still open and people could sit there side by side putting their hands all over these machines and coughing all over each other, and the people can be in that gym back there sweating all over each other and puffing and panting all over each other. And yet, on the other hand, the library is closed, where, you know, people might want to go get a book and go and read a book, you know. And the dojo, so that teacher kept calling us every couple of weeks. Oh, sorry, you know, they've extended another couple of weeks, another couple of weeks, another couple of weeks. And then yesterday he called again. Couldn't believe it, because it was like, it was due to start again 1st of June. The dojo was due to opening in 1st of June. And because this last week, they lifted the state of emergency in this area, right? So it's like, right, things are easing up. Already the plan was for the dojo to open the 1st of June, so we're good to go. And then yesterday, the teacher called up and said, oh, you won't believe it. It's like, what? Nani? You know? And he said the dojo's closing for another month. So after the state of emergency's been lifted and everything's supposed to start lightening up, the dojo is due to open anyway on the 1st of June. No, they've decided to stay closed till the 30th of June. Just reminding you again, there are no active cases of the virus in this area at all, you know. So just that sort of stuff, it just does your head in. It's like, what, you know? What are you doing? And again, no doubt there's some people watching this video who are in much worse situations than we are. No doubt at all. We know that, you know. But as always with our videos are just to report on what we see here and what we experience here. If it's worse in another country, which we know it is, we can't do anything about that. Our job is to report on what we experience, what we see, what we hear, what we experience here in Japan. So this is what we're telling you about. And this is the sort of stuff, and those guys who live in Japan won't be surprised by that. Our friend on Patreon that was having his rant, you know, he wasn't surprised. He wasn't surprised that this sort of stuff happens, because it happens here all the time. This sort of inconsistent, and a lot of these sort of dojo places are controlled by little committees of old men, and that's why you get inconsistency as well. You know, we're hoping that there's a dojo near here that we go to as well, and we're hoping this one will still open at the beginning of June, even though the one that's north of here at the other city won't open. And that could well happen. We're hoping that'll be the case, because that could well happen, and that sort of stuff happens here all the time. where you get this inconsistency, all these small groups of old men making different decisions and making them slow. There's a good chance those guys that made the decision to extend it for another month at that dojo just took so long to make that decision and had so many meetings and so much talking that by the time they got round to making the decision, the state of emergency had already been lifted, but they went ahead with their decision anyway. And there's another aspect to this too. In Japanese life, and you see this with the governments and the cities but you also see it in organisations like the post office and the banks and some big companies and things. They're very, very careful and paranoid about making mistakes. Super paranoid, and that often results in some really conservative decision making, because everyone's worried about making a mistake. So that's why they have these big long discussions, and they all sit around going, dojo, what shall we do, what shall we do? Dojo, what shall we do, what shall we do? And they hate it. They hate trying to make these decisions because they're all worried about making a bad one. And so that probably explains too why a lot of these decisions are so conservative. And here it is where everything's supposed to be getting lifted and everything's supposed to be getting easier and more free, that, you know, they've decided to go the opposite direction and shut the dojo down for another month. You know, and that's just one small example. There's a lot of other examples as well. Some really strange stuff in private enterprise. We showed you the home centre recently on I think it was a Sunday. We took that video, or a Saturday. It was a weekend, and it was going off. And that's been the case every day. That home centre and a couple of other home centres around here are just full on every day. The car parks are full of cars. The registers are full of lines of people. There's just tons of shoppers in there, much more than normal. And it's just obviously that what they're doing is they've been told to stay home. Please stay home. Been asked to stay home. So please stay home. So what they're doing is everybody's doing all this home stuff. So everybody's going to the home centers and the 100 yen shop. We just went past the 100 yen shop. We showed you a video outside there recently. That's the same too. So they're going to the 100 yen shop and they're going to the home centers and they're buying all these things to go home and do little projects at home, right? So those places are really, really super busy. But what we saw with that big home center that we showed you, they recently reduced the hours by a couple of hours a day. And a big sign, due to the coronavirus, we've reduced, just a side note, you can't say coronavirus in Japanese. They don't have the sounds for it. So they say corona virus, because there's no V's, there's no R's. You can't say S on its own. So corona virus. So that lots of talk about the virus. So there's a sign outside the home centre. Due to the coronavirus, the hours have been reduced. Now, those guys are busier than they ever are. Super, super busy, with lots and lots of customers and a full car park and lots of people queuing up at the registers. So they decide to reduce their hours. How could that possibly make any sense at all, you know? And this is the sort of stuff, some of you might have seen a video we made years ago called Contradictions and Paradoxes, and Japan's full of it. You know, there's full of it, where we're always getting comments. People often leave comments and see our video and they leave a comment and say, you said once this, and yet now you're showing us this, which sort of seems to be the opposite. And that's really true. That's really true. There's always contradictions and paradoxes here, where on the one hand they do this and on the other hand they do that, you know. And there's just, that's what we're seeing with this. Was that this sort of illogical, irrational. Some of you would have seen a video we made recently showing you that scale for the people, for individual people, that probably applies to people around the world, where, you know, rational, calm, rational, logical people sort of at the 0 mark, and then people that think coronavirus is nothing more than a common cold are down at the -10 mark, where they're taking absolutely no precautions at all, and they're not taking it seriously at all. They're down at the -10 mark. And then the people who are paranoid and hiding at home in their closet with their assault rifle and their rations are at the +10. And it's sort of the same with these organisations and companies and groups, you know, that some of them, like the pachinko places and the sports places and the gyms, you know, the gyms and those sort of guys seem to be just treating it like it's nothing, like, you know, no precautions necessary. And on the other hand, you're getting these groups of old men that control things like the dojo and probably the home center. Probably there's a board of dudes sitting around a table there, enjoying the extra profits that they're making, but not sure how to deal with it. So they decide to close the place early, open a bit later, open 30 minutes later in the morning, and close an hour and a half earlier at night. You know, and that, obviously that seems irrational to some of us, because that means that it's going to be more busy, isn't it, while it's open? If you've got that number of customers and suddenly you reduce the hours, you're still going to have the same number of customers all crammed together in a shorter period of time. So it's irrational, isn't it? If anything, they need to open longer so they can spread the customers out a bit, so they're not all packed in together. Because at the moment, the car park's full, and the registers, you know, they've got the spacing thing in the register, but it's hard to do that when it's full. You've got people walking in between the spaces that are supposed to be the social distance thing, and it's crazy, you know. So yeah, to our friend at Patreon, yeah, we're with you. Yeah. Just about every day there's something that we see or hear and go, why? You know, they've got the kids going back to school next week, and some kids went back to school this week, and they've got some weird, typically complicated stuff. You know, Japan always, we've talked about this so many times before, they always make things more complicated than they need be. And they've worked out these weird schedules this week and next week, where one group of kids goes on this day and another group of kids goes on another day, and the local junior high school, one day the girls are going to go, and two days later the boys are going to go. You know, what? And then, you know, these guys are going to go on this day and these guys are going to go on that day, and then from the 1st of June, everyone's going to go, just like a normal school day, which begs the question, instead of making it really complicated just to give them 1 or 2 days before then, why not just have everybody start on the 1st of June, you know? There's just so many stuff like that that's totally irrational and unnecessarily complicated. This was actually one of the things our friend Patreon was bitching about, was he's got kids. And when you've got kids, if both of you are trying to work, it's really difficult. And the other thing, again, with that decision making, they make the decision at the last minute. And you'll get this, yoko karanai, don't really know. We have to wait and see. And then finally you get a message from the school saying, this is the schedule. This is what we're going to do. With a really complicated schedule, and you've got to get your calendar and sort of plot it all out on the calendar and try and work out how your family's going to do this. This kid has to go to school this day, this kid has to go to school that day. But, of course, not full days. They're going to start at the normal time but come home 2 hours early, and the other day they're going to start 2 hours late and come home 1 hour early, and, you know, 1 hour later. Really complicated stuff where you've got to hang on, check every, you know, what's it, that day's got to be this and that day's going to be that. I mean, the idea is that from the 1st of June it's going to be normal school anyway. So some of us would say, well, instead of trying to do all that faffing around just to get an extra 4 hours or something, let's just leave it, let the teachers get ready, and the kids can just start again on the 1st of June with a normal school week, you know. So it's just what they do, and it's not over yet. To our friend at Patreon, you know it's not over yet. you know we're going to go through a lot more faffing around and a lot more illogical, irrational, crazy decision making, and, you know, inconsistent. That's the frustrating thing, is the inconsistency, and the irrational thing drives me nuts. Our friend was complaining about the inconsistency. The irrational thing drives me nuts because, you know, some of us try to be rational and reasonable and logical, and when the people around you are not, you know, particularly people who interfere with your life, who make decisions that does actually affect your life, and no doubt there'll be people watching this saying, yeah, it's the same in my city or same in my country. You know, we know, again, just to clarify, we know this stuff isn't unique to Japan, but our videos are about Japan, okay? So it's been a while since, because the YouTube comments have been turned off and on, we haven't heard it for a while. People used to say all the time, it's not only in Japan, you know, we know, but our videos are only in Japan. That's why we're not talking about Spain or other places, because it's about Japan, so. Anyway, that was that. Illogical and irrational, and the thumbnail for this video is going to have to be an old guy tearing his hair out, because that's what it's about. Two of us, our friend on Patreon and me, and probably a bunch of others too. Other people, our friends and neighbours. They're more patient. Japanese people are so patient, but they do get frustrated too, you know. So they just hide it well. Anyway, there it was. More videos coming soon.